We were talking about that, a little deja vu, we put them there.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Yarmouth Select Board Affordable Housing Workshop, being held today on April 22nd, 2025, at 6 p.m. in the Yarmouth Town Hall Hearing Room on 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. We are open to Zoom. If you would like to participate, just go ahead to the Yarmouth website, and there will be instructions for how to do that. This will be a workshop, so this will be different than what you usually see for a select board meeting. And I want to start by welcoming all of our participants for tonight. Thank you all very much for joining us. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm looking forward to all that I can learn tonight. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Bob, our town administrator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My deepest thanks to the Select Board for organizing our stakeholders meeting this evening for an affordable housing workshop. Our first order of business is I would like to call to order the meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust. We have a posted meeting this evening to participate in the discussion with the Select Board, and we also have the Community Housing Committee here, and I would entertain their calling to order as well.
Recognizing a quorum, the chair would like to open the April 22nd meeting, joint meeting between the Select Board, Affordable Housing Committee, and the housing and the Town Yarmouth Housing Committee.
That's great. Now, we're all legal. I also,
We need to do a roll call vote just because Myra Sahanovich is.
Okay. So we've got some remote participation, and let's announce that first. On behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust, we have a remote participant, Myra Suchinitz, who, because of geographic disparity right now, is with us remotely. So we'll take a roll call vote to come to order, and I would say Myra.
Here.
Bob Lawton.
Here.
Mark Forrest.
Here.
Robert Rittenauer here, so we're
You have a quorum.
we're in order.
You have to do the same.
Yeah,
My roll
Housing
call
Committee
vote.
will also do a roll call vote. Drew? Here. John, yes. Lee?
Here.
Greg?
Here.
Deirdre?
Here.
Myra?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Okay.
Bob, one thing I did overlook, we should say the Pledge of Allegiance before we start. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Well, it's great to see all of these familiar faces, and there's no need to go around and introduce folks because everyone's got their name tags. I want to, before I move things along, I really want to highlight and thank specifically our housing coordinator, Mary Wagan, for all of her efforts, not only on an ongoing basis, but to pull all of this together. It really has been a fabulous year for Mary, and she's been doing this for so long. It is just amazing to work with her and have her here. So our deepest thanks also to Mary for organizing everything. And so, we welcome everyone. This is obviously a great opportunity for all of the various stakeholders, representatives of the public, to get together and to update each other and share information on housing strategies so that we can all talk about what the major initiatives are for the town, what direction that we're going. In doing so, we've also brought together our consultants on this. Yes, Mary?
And we have members from the Yarmouth Housing Authority. We have Wendy Olson, who's the Executive Director of the Yarmouth Housing Authority, Bambi Wyatt Rosario, who's the chair of their commission, and of course Drew Kraus, who is a board member for the Housing Authority, and their representative to our housing committee.
That's great. Now, we don't have a full quorum of the Housing Authority, so
What's a quorum? Joe Glenn is on.
He's just observing, he's not participating.
Is this a posted meeting?
No.
He was going to go on and watch it live instead.
Okay.
okay. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn over, we've got some very substantive agenda items with us this evening, and it starts with an update on our short-term rental study. And, you know, communities such as Yarmouth, all seasonal communities, really have had an impact based on the housing that it has such, whether it's short-term rentals, seasonal housing, it has a very big impact on our existing housing stock in communities, and a lot of what the thought process planning that's ongoing in terms of affordable housing here in Yarmouth is not focusing on new housing, but the existing housing stock that we have in our community, which, you know, really takes a lot of challenges based on some of these seasonal issues. And one of our major initiatives that the Housing Trust has been working on over the past year is to put together this detailed study of the short-term rental market and what potential impacts that's having on our housing here in the community in terms of setting up potential competition for seasonal versus year-round housing, and how that all works. And in order to assist us in really getting our arms around this and developing some actionable recommendations for how best to deal with this, we've gotten together, working with the Select Board, funded a study by the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute into the seasonal housing and short-term rentals in Yarmouth. And we have with us Kerry Spritzer from the Donahue Institute that is initiating the study, and she's going to give us a sort of a detailed analysis of her scope and information that she's found, and hopefully that'll foster some very good discussion here on some of these seasonal housing issues and how that impacts existing housing stock. So, Kerry, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm sorry, I don't see an option to turn on my video, but if somebody can enable that, I'm happy to. So I have a slide deck here that I've shared with your team. Are folks seeing the
Yeah.
Yeah, Carrie.
Yes.
Hi. Should I just suggest when I'd like them to advance, if that works for folks on the call?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's the beautiful UMass Amherst campus where our offices are located. And my name's Kerry Spitzer. I'm a senior research manager at the UMass Donahue Institute. I work in the economic and public policy research group at the Donahue Institute, and we've been working throughout the state on housing issues. In particular, we've been doing quite a bit of work related to short-term rentals, both on the Cape, but also on the islands as well. And honestly, we just finished up some work for the statewide housing plan as well that dealt with seasonal communities. So if you advance to the next slide, I just wanted to give folks broad overview of the study. Here you'll see the town of Yarmouth, and the little green dots represent properties that are part of the portfolio of properties that are either on VRBO, vacation rental by owner, or Airbnb. So that's that image there. And we're going to be using that data along with a bunch of other data sources to really try to inform conversations in the community about short-term rentals and seasonal housing. The goal, as was just stated, is to provide reasonable, actionable recommendations for the team. So we're going to do this through a kind of a 4 big buckets of analysis. We're going to be doing quantitative data collection and analysis, key informant interviews that I'm hoping to kick off soon and may involve many members of the audience or the people who are in the room right now. We'll also be doing some scenario analysis to kind of understand how would certain types of regulations potentially impact the town of Yarmouth. And then we'll be writing up a final report and doing a summary presentation. So if you move to the next slide, this just kind of visualizes the timeline. So we kicked off early 2025, and I think on your slide you might be seeing 2015. That was a typo on my part. I know we're in 2025, not time traveling. So right now, we've done a lot of the quantitative data collection and primarily pulled a ton of census data. We also have administrative data. I'll get into all the sources in a moment. Then we're going to move into kind of more the qualitative phase of the study, where we're going to be doing a literature review, interviews with stakeholders. That'll take time to analyze and make sense of. We'll be drafting a report over the summer and then delivering that report in the middle of September of this year. So sorry about that typo. I'll give you a high-level overview of the different data sources we're using. So the American Community Survey from the U.S. Census Bureau, that provides really rich demographic data and also has some housing indicators such as cost burden, and I'll get into that more. The U.S. Census Bureau population estimates are kind of the go-to source for understanding how the population's changed over time. ES202 data comes from the state and has to do with issues around labor and workforce. From the Department of Revenue, we're able to get their list of properties that have been registered for, some properties do not need to pay the tax, but any place that has over 15 days a year of short-term rental needs to be registered and pay taxes to the Department of Revenue. So we have that data source, which it's a really rich data source, and gets at kind of where places are located, and it captures places that may not be using sources like tools like Airbnb or VRBO to rent out their data. AirDNA data is a really neat source that we've used in the past. It scrapes the web for Airbnb and VRBO listings. So that's a great resource for understanding prices, where places are located, and kind of intensity of use. So we triangulate that with the Department of Revenue data. We also get data from the Warren Group on sales and transactions of homeownership units in the community. The U.S. Postal Service data we can look at for some trends in migration. Department of Housing and Urban Development has some great data on things like transportation access, and then we've also we're using municipal data to understand more detailed registration data on the short-term rentals. So here's another kind of overview of the key variables that we're going to be looking at. And we do have some initial findings. I want to say, like, we've pulled all of this data. We're still making sense of it. As you can see, it's a lot of variables, but I'll just show you some high-level key findings that we've seen so far. Maybe that'll help kick off your conversation, although you may be very well aware of these trends already, but it's always nice to have the data to back them up. So we looked at, we broke the community into South Yarmouth, West Yarmouth, and Yarmouth Port after conversations with Mary and her team. But we're also going to present in all these slides the data on the whole town of Yarmouth. That's the Yarmouth combined slide. So you can see we've seen growth in the population, which is, in line with what we've seen on Cape Cod as folks have moved out to the Cape after and during the pandemic. But you'll see the number of households has actually grown even more, and that's in line with some of the trends we're seeing throughout the state. So even in some places where the population's declining, you're seeing a growth in households because as people age, they form smaller households, just 1 or 2 person households. And we're seeing also millennials kind of break out on their own and start to form their own households. So some of it's demographic shifts over time. Now, the median household income in Yarmouth is slightly lower than the county and state, but you can see there's significant variation among the communities. And over time, we've seen a growth in income. However, at the same time, we're also seeing increasing cost burden. Here, I just focus in on renters because renters are often the most likely to experience housing cost burden. And just as a reminder, the Department of Housing and Urban Development defines cost burden as spending greater than 30% of your income on housing. And that's kind of what is used as the general rule of thumb for affordability. So if you're spending more than that, then it's considered that your housing's unaffordable. So you can see that we've seen an increase in Yarmouth over time, and also that Yarmouth is experiencing, it looks like, and I say it looks like because these bars are the error bars. So they, as many of you may know, with the census, it's with the American Community Survey data, we're taking a sample. So the sample's smaller in the town of Yarmouth. So that's why you're seeing these bigger and bigger error bars as you go down to smaller and smaller places. But the trend overall is we're seeing increase in cost burden, particularly among renters. And it also varies somewhat by community type, or by neighborhood, but it's hard to say if that's significant because the error bars are so great. And then we also looked at the American Community Survey data. You can look at seasonal vacancy. So we wanted to look at, as you all know, Barnstable County has a much higher rate of seasonal vacancy than the rest of the state. Well over 30% across the Cape. And one of the things that I think is interesting to note is it's actually dropped down a little bit, and I think that's a large part driven by what we said during the pandemic with folks moving out to the Cape full time. And it'll be interesting to see how that trend goes kind of as we go further and out past the pandemic. And you'll see also it varies significantly across communities, and West Yarmouth has the highest share of seasonal vacancies. Are you guys advancing? I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you to advance.
We're
I'm
doing
on the
great.
slide right now.
No problem. Mary's controlling it.
Great. You guys are doing a great job. I'm sorry, I just don't have that visual. So next step. So that is just like we've pulled a lot more data, but I was told we had 10 minutes. So those are high level pieces of information. So the next stage, and this is the part where we're moving into, is we're going to be doing key informant interviews. These are some of the entities and groups that we've just identified that we'd like to interview. We've designed an interview guide, and we're going to be going out and interviewing folks, hopefully at least, somebody from each one of these buckets, maybe multiple people from each one of these buckets. And the goal here is to really, the American Community Survey and all that quantitative data can only tell you so much about a community. We believe it's really important to get out there and talk to folks. So what we're hoping is that these interviews will help ground the work in the specifics of Yarmouth, understand better the potential impacts of different regulations, and also what's the appetite for some of these regulations. Some of them may not, fly in the community. And also to get some insight from talking to local community members about some of the history of short-term rentals in the community, and to help make sense of the trends that we're seeing in the quantitative data. So what we do is we'll record all the interviews, we'll transcribe them, and also use tools such as NVivo to code the interviews to identify key themes that'll hopefully come through. And then we'll share those back with everyone through the report. And then the final step is this short-term rental scenario analyses. So we've identified a few potential short-term rental regulation scenarios. There's quantitative unit caps where a fixed number of permits are based on a percentage of the housing stock. You can, set this above or below the current permit count, depending on a town's need. This was used in the town of Vail, Colorado, for example, and they set a limit of 25% of existing housing unit stock in 2022, which was around 900 units and above the number of permitted short-term rentals at the time. So that's what quantitative unit caps refers to. We also will look at potential zoning regulations. So this would be something where like short-term rentals were permitted only in certain zoning districts, such as designated resort zoning districts, or you could do a numeric cap on permits that varies between the districts. Other options are restricting number of nights or instances. So this would be permitting owners to short-term rent only a certain number of times per year, either by implementing a limit on how many times a unit can be rented annually or on a total number of nights rentals can occur. This could also require a minimum number of nights. For example, a short-term rental must be rented for periods of a week or more. You could also restrict short-term rentals to owner-occupied homes. For example, in Great Barrington, Mass, there have been limits on short-term rentals to one per person, and it bans corporate ownership, although the town does allow LLC's ownership. So that's one example. Others could be restricting to single-family homes. Some towns do not allow short-term rentals in multifamily dwellings or accessory dwelling units. For example, this is a regulation in place in Truckee, California, near Lake Tahoe. So those are the types of things we're going to be looking at. Also through the interviews, if we hear of other regulations that people are interested in us exploring, we could definitely take those up as we go. If you move on to slide 16, this is just some of the data we've already gathered. So just for some background information, so there are 1,438 units that are registered with the Department of Revenue. Now those blue units are those that are exempt either because they are it's not that they're exempt. We think they pose put less stress on the local community. So they could either be exempt because they're being rented out for fewer than 15 days, or they are owner occupied and they have like just a room being rented out, whereas the rest of the unit is still being occupied by an owner. Those 1,264 units are those that I think are the more traditional short-term rentals that people think of. So they're more than 15 days. They're not owner occupied, and it's that style where you're renting out a whole house or a whole apartment on a site, or it could be through a real estate agent. So then we broke down and looked at where are these located. So you can see the majority are in West Yarmouth, but right behind that are South Yarmouth and then Yarmouth Port. And then we dived into the AirDNA data and looked at the trends over time. And you can see this is not really unique to Yarmouth, but right during the pandemic, there was actually a decline in the number of people who are renting out through sites such as Airbnb and VRBO. And often that was because people were moving into their second homes and using them more intensely themselves personally, or it may have been uncomfortable during the pandemic. So it's not just in Yarmouth, but you're seeing this across the Cape, that there was kind of a dip in short-term rentals. Yeah, great. So, and then we've also seen kind of the trends over time with the rates. It's been pretty steady, but declining slightly in 2024, though I'll note that for that year, we have the data through June 2024, so it's possible that rates were higher in August. It's a partial year. And then you can look at the breakdown of units where those on Airbnb and VRBO are generally larger units, 3-bed, 4-bedroom units. So those are the initial findings and the plan for the study. I'm happy to take any questions if that was part of the design here, or just sit back and listen. Thank you so much. My contact info is on the last slide if anybody wants to reach out directly.
Does anyone have any questions that they would like to? Carrie, a wonderful presentation, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Carrie?
I do. I just have a couple of quick questions. I know your scope was in there, but I'm not sure if you have had the opportunity yet to look at our zoning bylaw and our ADU bylaw and have any thoughts or suggestions in terms of how it compares.
That is definitely going to be something we're going to do. We've pulled those documents. I don't think we've had a chance to really process them or analyze them enough to have recommendations at this time.
Are there any other questions for Carrie? Joyce?
Carrie, thank you very much. I wondered if you have any sense of how AirDNA might miss some rentals. I have the odd feeling that there are people who rent out their houses, for weeks or months in the summer, but that aren't registered anywhere.
That is certainly a concern with using any of the data sources. So we triangulate because we know that not one of the data sources is perfect. So with the Airbnb and VRBO sites, you're missing out on, say, somebody who's been coming to the same house every week or a couple of weeks every year, and their family is just dealing directly with the owner. We're also missing out on anything where there's a real estate agent who doesn't use those websites to advertise the properties. And we know from our work in places like Nantucket and Provincetown that those are, not an insignificant share of the properties. The nice thing is that the AirDNA is hopefully giving you a good sense of kind of what the market price is for a unit in the community. But obviously we are missing out on some data. With the Department of Revenue data, that often has a higher count of overall number of properties. So hopefully, it's more likely that a property will be there, but it has no information about how much it's being rented for or how intensely it's being used. So that's the downside of the Department of Revenue data. But I also know that Yarmouth has its own registration, so we're kind of taking all three of these pieces and putting them together. But you're right, we're not going to get 100% coverage with any one of these sources.
Sharon?
Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering, your slide did not have anything about the scenario for short-term rentals to suggest some type of restrictions would be about taxation. And I've read a little bit that there are some taxation ideas that may curb.
And we'd be happy to look at those as well in our analysis. If yeah, we could definitely look at taxation. There's no reason we couldn't.
Norma, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I saw among the stakeholders, I did not see a plan to interview any of the people that are actually renting, the owners, in other words. I was in that situation for the first 5 years that we owned our home. The only way here, we lived in Vermont at the time, the only way we could afford to own the home and meet our future plans was to rent during the summer. So if there are all kinds of restrictions placed, people won't become residents and homeowners in the future.
We're definitely open to interviewing anybody who owns a short-term, not anybody, but a stakeholder who owns a short-term rental. That's something we've done in our other projects in places like Provincetown.
I just have one other thought. You talk a lot about the restrictions. I wonder if you've seen it or you could research seeing it. One of the things we've talked about in our board is instead of restricting it, incentivizing year-round rentals. And if you can or will be able to bring any of those suggestions or successes forward to us, where, I envision some type of incentive, instead of restricting people, but incentivizing people to rent year-round.
Yeah, and you'll see that policy has actually been or a policy to incentivize year-round rentals has been implemented in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And we've been pretty familiar with the work out there, so we'd be happy to look at that
Excellent.
approach as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's Mary Wagon. So I just want to reiterate that when this came up during the final days of reviewing our housing production plan, we talked about looking at the impacts of short-term rentals on our housing market and assumed it was all negative, right? So when we brought the draft HPP to the planning board said, oh, there's some benefits to short-term rentals too. So it really changed the theme of the whole effort to identify what are the costs, what are the benefits, to minimize the costs and amplify the benefits. So we have that. Thank you for talking about regulations versus incentives, because that brought up, like, I didn't say that in the beginning, that the whole purpose of this is to amplify the benefits and mitigate the costs associated with short-term rentals.
Thank you, Mary. Go ahead.
I have a question in terms of the Provincetown study that you're alluding to. It's completed, is that true?
Yeah, there was a short-term rental study led by one of my colleagues. I think it was completed in 2022 or 2023.
Okay, so just towards the end of the pandemic.
Yep.
And where is that available?
I believe it's available on our website. I can definitely connect with Mary to share it out if.
That might be helpful to all of us. Sounds like a work that is help leading this work. You're referring to it enough times, we probably should acquaint ourselves with it. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Carrie?
I guess I could also ask, are there any other studies going on the Cape? Provincetown, Yarmouth?
So Carrie, it's Mary again, and I haven't had a chance to really touch base with you, but I was at a meeting where the Cape Cod Commission was presenting the regional housing strategy, and they had announced that they are going to do a study of short-term rentals for the county. So I have to make sure that the Cape Cod Commission knows that UMass is helping Yarmouth and vice versa, because there might be some sharing of data.
Excellent.
That's good to know, and I've worked closely with the Cape Cod Commission on some other projects, but I was not aware they were doing a short-term rental study.
I think the Cape Cod, the Assembly of Delegates has also alluded to its own version of a study.
I'm hoping it's the same one.
Okay.
I'm hoping that's the funding source.
Right.
And the commission as the Regional Planning Commission is doing the study, so.
Like usual,
But I will find out.
Mary's all over it. Thanks, Mary.
Carrie, thank you so much for participating today. We certainly are going to look forward to your future work on this project.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to some of you through the interview process, so take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you very much, Carrie, much appreciated. And so board members and anyone on that list can expect to be contacted, and look forward to, incorporating your interview into the study process. And our next item on the agenda is an update from our Affordable Housing Trust. And I thought I'd back up just a little bit and maybe talk explain exactly what our housing trust is, the types of things that we do, and then I'd like to get into some of our major initiatives that we've been working on the past year, and we look forward very much to working on with the upcoming year. And essentially, we have in Yarmouth an affordable housing trust that was established back in 2007. It was a town meeting vote provided for. There's the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund Bill, Chapter 491 of the Acts of 2004, and that provides the entire legislative basis for having an affordable trust. And the purpose of an affordable housing trust is to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing to benefit low and moderate income households in our community. And the reason for a trust, it is a flexible and innovative tool that was established by the Commonwealth to help create housing opportunities and funding opportunities that needed action more quickly than our annual budget process. Oftentimes with the availability of property as it comes up, with the availability of potential developers to achieve housing projects, that you need to move forward a little quicker than our cycle of having 2 town meetings every year. So the Affordable Housing Trust is a flexible mechanism for stimulating that type of discussion and maybe moving things forward and then coming to town meeting at the appropriate times there. Now, in the affordable housing situation for Yarmouth, the town has set the goal of having at least 10% of its year-round housing stock qualified as affordable. And here we have made, I think, good progress toward that 10% goal. We're currently about halfway there. So approximately 5% of the housing stock in Yarmouth can be considered affordable at this point, and that was about less than 3.5% in 2010. So it's, you know, slow progress, but it is very measurable progress that's being made. And the Affordable Housing Trust throughout these years has played a critical role. Since being established, the trust has created or preserved 191 units. So that's quite a contribution. And we currently have a number of projects that are in the pipeline. And I think the one that we're most proud of, we've spent the last year working with Habitat for Humanity to put together, we have a mixed-use housing, and it's a home ownership opportunity program out on 1121 Route 28, where we had some housing sites that were separated from a commercial development, and we're able to work with Habitat to provide some real ownership opportunities for our community. And so that is a project that is significant, and we're looking forward to moving forward with. In 2025, coming from 2024, we've spent quite a bit of time obviously working with the Donahue Institute to set up and fund the short-term rental study. We're also going to hear about this evening a little bit our support for the Mattakees Utilization Committee as they consider the most advantageous use of the former Mattakees school. And we have a number of other initiatives that are ongoing. And this year, one of the key initiatives that we wanted to bring to the forum and really introduce for our stakeholder team is the focus that we've developed on working with the town's existing zoning that's in place to try to help stimulate mixed-use village-style development, targeting some of the grayfield sites and blighted areas in our community that are located along the Route 28 corridor and over years have been starved of private investment. And this initiative feeds directly into the town's local comprehensive planning efforts and the zoning efforts that the planning board has really spearheaded over the past many years. And what we're doing is to try to work to better implement some of the village-style mixed-use zoning that we have in place now, and also stimulate additional study as we move forward with a process to update the town's local comprehensive plan. How are we articulating that vision for not only the creation of housing, but the stimulation of economic investment in the village-style development, mixed-use development that the town would like to see along its economic corridor. In order to help those planning efforts directly, the Affordable Housing Trust provided this past year matching funds for a state community planning grant that is also dovetailed with the appropriation that we have for the local comprehensive plan to specifically promote mixed-use development to facilitate positive coordinated growth of both housing and year-round employment. And this study is ongoing. In your packet, we're very happy to see we received an update from our planning staff that we have the Yarmouth Site Land Development Services Village Scale Mixed Use Proposed Site Development Services. And so one of the key economic studies, in addition to a market analysis for our downtown corridor, is this mixed use analysis that will hopefully, we hope to see identify, some specific properties, strategies, areas that we can best govern our efforts to stimulate private investment, at the same time creating housing. And I want to acknowledge Bill Scott, Kathy Williams, and along with Mary have been working very hard on that. And we have Jay Grandy with us this evening that I don't know if everyone has met yet, and he's our interim economic development coordinator. And he brings with him a boatload of experience in mixed-use development, putting projects together, stimulating private investment along public thoroughfares in communities throughout Massachusetts. So it's very helpful to begin to put together between the consultants, our planning team, and to have the affordable housing groups work to support those efforts. And in also implementing some of these strategies, one of the projects that the trust has specifically implemented, and we're developing a little bit of a track record with, but we'd like to see this planning work help, really supercharge these efforts, is we've implemented a Grayfield and blighted property forgivable loan program that is designed to outreach owners and developers of some of the blighted properties in town with pre-engineering assistance that we feel if we can get into their planning process for future developments early enough that we could use our additional funding to help do the planning study that's necessary to provide quality housing opportunities along with mixed-use economic development that will help bring employment into our community and support higher wages and economic activity, as well as having that village-style housing. And that's a critical, I think, goal of the zoning that was implemented, and it's one of the projects that we're really trying to push. And I think a lot of it was in response to the standard 40B applications that we see, one after another, where there's a lot of developers that really, aren't as sophisticated in putting together more complicated mixed-use commercial and housing developments that use smart growth, do things such as, we're looking at concepts like the historically themed architectural cues for a commercial business up closer to Route 28, as opposed to having that sea of parking, and to have tastefully parking kind of in the rear associated with some housing development that creates a site that has the visual sort of village feel that we want to see, but also the economic vigor that we need to kind of create jobs in our community. And a lot of times the developers of property, people that are looking to make investments, they see, the 40B route as the shortcut that, we'll just bypass the zoning because the community hasn't reached its 10% yet, and it makes us very vulnerable to these types of just housing developments that might not give the town what it needs in terms of trying to stimulate that economic activity. And if, we feel if there is new development along the corridor, we want to see it along the lines in that model that the planning board has identified and we're continuing to study. And so what, that is an example of how the trust can use some of its financing, some of its ability to act between town meetings, to step in and do it in an incentive-based way that will help developers come to the table. We've got really quite a team, and Mary does a great job in sort of being the gatekeeper on this process to try to bring developers to the table. We have a couple of folks we're talking to now. Obviously, one of the issues with our local comprehensive plan is since the village mixed-use zoning was put into place, it hasn't been a tool that's attracted a tremendous amount of development and mixed-use investors, and I think a lot of those problems were associated with not having the infrastructure to support this type of development in our community, which is all changing as well, and why it's so important. And I think that gives you maybe some examples of how we're using the trust to dovetail. We're not out there on a limb. We're trying to be, the knitting needles that sort of knits together all of the housing needs with the economic needs, with the planning that's going on in the community, and to help push to stimulate the articulation of that vision that we can bring to the community and hopefully generate some more support. And I don't know if any of the members want to sort of chime in on, but I think that gives you a good flavor of where our thinking is currently.
Does anyone have any questions for Bob? Norm?
I think a lot of good comments, Bob, and it's good to hear about the Affordable Housing Trust coming up with an innovative plan. But I guess I've always been puzzled by the fact that we keep saying there's not enough housing, yet there seems to be a disconnect with developers. I mean, you would think if we don't have enough housing and prices are sky high, why aren't developers rushing in to fill that void? What is the disconnect there? Is it the infrastructure? I mean, you alluded to that, Bob. I think that may be part of the issue in mixed-use development, that they didn't have wastewater, so they couldn't develop a higher rise or something like that with apartments and so forth. Is that the only thing that's standing in the way?
Yeah, and we've attended there's regional seminars that have been ongoing on identifying exactly what those obstacles are. And, they bring up the lack of infrastructure, the additional regulations that exist on Cape Cod. And another issue that a lot of developers talk to us about is the access to capital, primarily for the economic development portions that, right now, there's no financing anywhere for any retail type of developments. And it's very difficult with the projects that come in. We see the access to capital largely for housing funded through the state, completely separate from economic development funding. And it's been very difficult to get a developer that can bridge that gap and come in with a package of financing on the economic development side and also on the housing. So, we have had some of the 40Bs, come in and we haven't been, very aggressive on those. We're trying to look for the more village-oriented, but I think that I would say moving forward with the completion of the comprehensive plan, and I think a stronger vision articulated by the town, we have the wherewithal to address some of the regulatory issues, and certainly it's a major financial boon to have that infrastructure there, and the investment in public infrastructure, I'm certain, will stimulate private investment. The access to capital piece, I think that, that's a continuing challenge that remains to be seen as to, where that is going to be headed over the next several years.
Is that something the Affordable Housing Trust?
Norm, could you step to the mic, please, so folks can hear?
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard that comment about the access to capital, especially with trying to develop retail. In other words, they just can't come up with projects that make sense to financing authorities. So I don't know if the Affordable Housing Trust can get involved in that, or if there are other entities within the town that can help private developers bridge that gap with capital.
And there's regional assistance in that regard as well. And I know a lot of the banks, we've attended the seminars, we've talked about capital, and so there's a lot of that thought going on. And there's a lot of need for smart local business minds too to get involved in that. So I'm hoping you could kind of continue to follow us along very closely.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Certainly.
So is this, in fact, I think some of you have this in your package, is this a response to your solicitation?
No, this is a response to the, with Bill and the Community Development Department getting together, put a successful grant together for a local community planning grant. And I think that was about $100,000, and we matched $25,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust. And those funds were placed under the comprehensive planning rubric to assist the town. So this is in response to that. They've found a consultant. They've got a project that's moving forward to implement that. So that's a major piece of the town's planning that we hope to bring with us over to the affordable housing and again, be the force to implement some of these ideas that are, coming out of the planning and development side.
So where is this then in this, what stage is this at then?
This is just starting off.
Okay. And does it suffer the issue of bridging the funding, the capital for the commercial enterprise? Is there a commercial enterprise involved in this proposal?
A little bit. There's a little bit, Liz.
Okay.
Just a little, yeah.
Just a little bit.
So this all came about because we had some blighted, really underutilized sites on Route 28, right? And we put, the town meeting was extremely generous and gave the trust over $3 million to manage, to help these dilapidated properties redevelop, right? It was the Motel Redevelopment Fund.
Right.
Right? And we did 2 sites, and they were great. One ended up being Yarmouth Commons, and one ended up being Yarmouth Gardens. And, Yarmouth Commons took the place of a blighted property. Yarmouth Gardens took the place of the oldest motel on, I think in Yarmouth, if not the Cape, I don't know. But we had these affordable housing developers, and we were so excited that they were able to come and help us out, And we said, well, can you make it mixed use, right? And they had financial barriers to that. So now we've done 2, right? Now we're like, okay, we want to get back to this vision of the mixed use, right? And not use Chapter 40B, because you lose so much local control with Chapter 40B. We're really trying to encourage developers with some Grayfield pre-development money, some technical supports, maybe some extra technical support from staff, I can't tell you how many people, they come in, they have a sketch on a parcel of land, and they say, what do you guys think? So we're starting to assemble our technical teams to really give them a lot of comment on that. If it's mixed, if it's what we want, if it's mixed use, and it fits our village center vision. And that's why we are so excited to have a consultant to work on really defining that village center vision and look at our zoning and make sure that our zoning is really going to get us where we want to
This is the
be.
consultant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe even come up with some theoretical sites, or maybe look at some real sites out there on Route 28 that need some help.
Yeah,
So it's really exciting. And remember, we have inclusionary zoning. So we don't need affordable housing zoning to get this to happen, right? We'll take a portion of the units that are being developed. Some of them will be affordable, and we're going to help them with that affordable housing piece. With that lottery, with that tenant selection, all of that. We help them with that. So we've identified big obstacles to getting the development we want on Route 28, and we're there helping to deal with those.
Tracy?
Try not to be cynical, but maybe my old age. I guess I've been around long enough to see these studies, the mixed-use development. I'm thrilled to be doing it, don't get me wrong, but we've done this several times before. And I think one of the things that's very difficult for people to understand with this, blighted property is that the town can't make somebody do something with their property. We can only give the tools to redevelop. I'm a huge fan of redevelopment and not new development. I think the local comprehensive plan is going to help us. I think one of the barriers, as I said before, is regulation. And if we can get the Cape Cod Commission out of a potential mixed-use development that we want, I think we have a better chance of attracting a developer. Anytime you ask a developer to put their money on the line to get an arbitrary answer at the end, and that's my personal opinion, that they go through all the steps, and you have this detriments and benefits analysis, which is completely arbitrary, and they've spent $1 million to get there. It's really hard to get a developer to want to do that. So getting the local comprehensive plan done so that we can get that is extremely important. I think right now the interest rates don't help us either. But one of the things that to your question, Liz, about the funding, all of our committees have funding for housing, right? So I think from a taxpayer's perspective, helping a developer for retail where they're profitable makes it a little bit more difficult. But the one thing I think that we should be looking at as a community is a potential development authority. We have the housing trust that can develop for housing, but if we had a development authority that was able to take over some of these parcels that we could then, to some extent, control, that'd be helpful. But the public should know that the town has worked very hard. There's, for many years, there's some very blighted properties that we have went to them and said, what can we do to make you invest in your property? And some of them, they just don't want to.
Right.
And it puts us in a very difficult situation. So, we've never had the development authority that could potentially have funding to maybe flip these types of properties, because they can't help the retail piece of it with affordable housing funding, right? So when you get mixed use, it gets maybe more complicated, but it's what we want. So maybe we need a development authority to
Agreed.
help that.
I think we do.
Are there any, Mary?
So, thank you, Tracy, for reminding me that part of Route 28, we have a growth incentive zone. How I describe it, it's pre-approval by the Cape Cod Commission for something that would normally trigger a lengthier review. And that the Cape Cod Commission is updating its regional policy plan. So I've gone to one meeting, and I encourage them to make GIZs, the growth incentive zones, easier, because that's what we have on Route 28 for motels that are going to redevelop. I like those better than the activity centers, the community activity centers, because the growth incentive zones are kind of linked to your local zoning. It's required. So that's super important. Unfortunately, Kathy Williams, our town planner, could not be here tonight. She said she was gonna watch, so we'll see how my comment grades with her.
Thank you, Mary. Any other questions?
No, I just would encourage us, yes, to stay plugged in with that RPP development rewrite. That they are receptive, but you have to make sure you get there.
Yeah, I think communities have been using the GIZ.
Yeah.
So.
Bob?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I want to move on to the issue of an update for some of our housing input into the Matty Keys Utilization Committee, and I want to recognize Sharon Weimer, the chairman, and also Bill Scott, who has largely been an architect of this process, how much we've appreciated as housing advocates having the Matty Keys process to participate in. And I think it's important to point out, too, right at the outset, the reason we have this on the agenda and how it fits into the bigger picture, it's very important to point out to everyone that when the Select Board created the Mattakese Utilization Committee and gave them their charge, it's a very broad charge and a very complicated charge, and our hats are off to them the way they've approached this. And one of the things that they've done is to go out throughout the community, the various stakeholder groups, and elicit input as to what potential each group had for that overall very large site out at Mattakese. And my critical point here is that we acknowledge and respect that this is a very broad area, and there are many independent groups just like ours that are feeding into this process. And before we hear back from the Mattakese Utilization Committee on their proposed recommendations, there's a whole series of community forums and input that they need to go through. In this particular instance, the stakeholders here, this team, this group of tables that you see, the reason we were anxious to come forward on the Mattakese topic is because, and I'll say it right out, all of us housing stakeholders were particularly proud of our ability to answer the call when it was put out by Mattakese that they needed potential ideas for the Mattakese site. We got together immediately, and Mary was a great spark plug in this, held brainstorming sessions, and then we held second sessions to prioritize things, and a third session, and every one of these was so well attended by all of our housing stakeholders, was participated in strongly. We developed a series of ideas and recommendations that I just think we're proud of our efforts at stepping forward and being a part of the process. We're not trying to, strong arm the Mattakese process at this point and try to get ahead of everyone, but we wanted to, we thought it was a very instructive idea of how you start with the community's housing production plan, and how you take a particular site and begin to apply the principles that are embodied in that plan. This could have been a different site, and in the future, these exact ideas, this stakeholder participation, this ability to brainstorm and then hone it down into priorities, I'm certain that we could use and replicate on other sites. And the communication that came is sort of helped us put together this process. Now we know each other so well that we're used to the different groups meeting and talking and working together. So just a few words on how we got here and what our purpose for talking about the Mattakese is in the middle of the poor utilization committee's process, where they still have a lot of more work to do. So in doing our brainstorming, doing all of the prioritization, we worked with the Barrett Planning Group that initially through county funding from the ARPA funds, they provided a bank of consulting dollars that we were able to use to help organize our efforts. And we have with us this evening Alexis Lanzalata, the principal planner for the Barrett Planning Company. And I'd like to turn it over to Alexis and have her walk us through a little bit on how we approached this planning process and what our results were. So I would do that. Mary, did I leave anything
I
out?
think Alexis is there. Can you hear us, Alexis?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Welcome. We see you as well.
Oh, great. Excellent. So thank you for having me tonight. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the process was that we conducted with the housing team as part of the MUC process, and where the team has landed tentatively, and go over the draft for the housing proposal. And, Mr. Chair, I think you make a great point that while the MUC process is ongoing, it does make sense, given that this is the housing workshop, just to give a little kind of update about where the housing land use team currently is. But I'm also going to walk you through just kind of a general refresher of the MUC process.
Can I just, I'm sorry, for people at home, MUC is Matakees Utilization Committee, MUC. We use that term, but I don't think a lot of people know what that is, so
You're
sorry.
so right, Tracy.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. You are so right, and I get too hung up on acronyms. So thank you for that reminder. Hang on, let me just try that again here.
That, right?
You were up,
Not on
Yes.
the projector, but
we can see it. What's important is the people at home can see it.
Okay, great. Let's see. I'm not sure why it's showing you want to know? So, Town of Yarmouth, are you sharing it or am I?
You're live now.
You're live.
Okay. Okay, so you just see the
I see the arm of Cape Cod.
presentation on, yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. Great. So thank you again, everybody. So as was mentioned, our work was through the Barnstable County Shared Regional Housing Services Program as part of this 2-year pilot program that we are working on with the county. We allotted each town 30 hours of technical assistance. So working closely with Mary, we used those are using those 30 hours to assist the housing team. And so I'm just going to walk you through a bit of what we have done. So I'm going to just give an overview of the MUC process and where our kind of role is with the housing team as part of that much larger long-term process. And then I'm going to share where the housing team proposal in its current draft has landed, and then just open it up to the board for discussion. And any of the kind of feedback or questions or notes, I think will just be kind of, noted and assembled with the work to date that the housing team has done, which all will be going to the MUC group for their continued review. So just as a review of the MUC process, just kind of a little excerpt of the charge. I just love this visual, which is from the memo that was in your agenda packet. Because I think it just shows how the process here that I think was really well thought out by your Assistant Town Administrator, William Scott, and the MUC group, utilizes the expertise of people that are already in your community to kind of report back to the Matakees Utilization Committee, or MUC, so that they can then formulate a plan for the use of the site. So the MUC charge, just an excerpt, is to create an effective reuse plan in a manner that considers multiple alternatives toward achieving a proposal for reuse of the site, and in doing so to ensure inclusion of the many interests in the property in an impartial manner, and combine that input with technical support to determine alternative scenarios that will contribute to, but not be limited to, one or many of the following areas. So you can see where those land use teams kind of came about, and housing is one of those areas that the town wanted to be explored as a potential use for part of the site. So you can see there are these other land use teams here that have been meeting, and I'll walk you through a little bit of kind of the status of all of that work. But there is a municipal services team, housing team. That was where our work through the county was really focused. Economic development, we're also, we at Barrett have also been assisting the CEDC, Community and Economic Development Committee, and the Chamber. They make up the economic development team. Then the recreation land use team, education, and open space and water supply. So with the hope being that all of these different land use teams, they have a process that has been laid out, and with assistance from staff, these teams are going through a series of meetings to arrive at a scenario that considers their focus. It very well can consider other focuses as well, and you'll see that in the housing scenario that I'm when I show the current draft. But then all of those proposals will eventually go to MUC, the the Mattakese Utilization Committee, and they will then be working with a consultant to really kind of flesh out a master plan idea for the site that utilizes a lot of the work that's been done here. So I just want to give a shout out to the Mattakese Utilization Committee and to Bill Scott for all of their work on this. I believe this is the current committee, the current configuration of the committee. Apologies if there's any errors there, and again to Bill Scott, a lot of the memos, there's a project page for the process that's been going on, and there's a lot of wonderful resources there, past reports that have been shaping the process, and just various memos that have been put forward to the community or to different groups to date. So it's a really kind of well organized project page that you can go to for updates. But the kind of structure, I mentioned that each of those land use teams is trying to follow kind of a similar structure to arrive at a scenario. And so the first meeting was, kind of affectionately called Run Amok. It's just a big brainstorming session. So you have this kind of funnel here, and that is where all of these ideas are funneling down, and really everything was on the table. So the hope in the first meeting was, to have some context, some understanding of really, important things that we can't ignore or we want to be aware of, like what does the existing zoning say? What are the environmental constraints for housing? What does the housing production plan say to give guidance to both groups that are part of the housing team, which are the Housing Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust. And so looking at kind of some high level constraints, otherwise really just having big picture thinking, what are your hopes and dreams for this site? Then the second meeting that the teams are kind of asked to do is reconciliation. So it's where you take all of those ideas that have been put in this funnel, if you will, and trying to narrow it down to 3 ideas. And then the third meeting the purpose is to come up with a proposal at kind of 2 levels, a moderate and an elevated level. So all of those teams that I had talked about, they're kind of going to be doing that same process. And so the MUC group then is going to be taking all of that input and working with the consultant to come up with recommendations to the select board, because the MUC committee is a select board appointed committee. And so their recommendations at the end of the process will be going back to you. But just to kind of walk you through where housing is. So the housing meetings took place in January, February, and March. And they were able to arrive at a kind of a draft scenario at a moderate and an elevated level that I'll show you. The Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Housing Committee in subsequent meetings have continued to kind of refine the proposal. So that's why we're calling it a draft, because there may be some changes before it goes to MUC, and then MUC will use that input to eventually prepare suggestions for the select board to consider. But just to kind of summarize here, you can see there's a lot of active meetings going on for these different land use teams. And it's still ongoing. So to your point, Mr. Chair, this is an ongoing process, and we're not trying to get ahead of anybody here, just talking about, since we're here to talk about housing, where the housing group has kind of landed so far. And so the housing team draft proposal is, there are 2 here that were in your meeting packet. There's a moderate and an elevated, because that was the task as it was laid out, was to come up with a scenario that could be kind of viewed at 2 different scales. So the general hope that the housing team wanted to propose was that there would be kind of a mixed use site with residential and community and commercial uses that would be compatible with the housing on the site, potentially things like a convenience store, coffee shop, childcare shops, and so on. And so at the moderate level, what we did when we went to the meeting with both groups, the Housing Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust, we leaned on the kind of the goals that were in the housing production plan for what your annual production target was, and what the breakdown was of rental versus ownership, and Then the groups kind of fine-tuned it a little bit. But that's where those numbers, the preliminary numbers came from. We just looked to the housing production plan. It's great that you have a recently completed one that gave us that guidance. But so you can see here, there's, again, I'll walk you through briefly both of these separately, but just to show you how this is laid out. Again, there's that moderate scenario and then the elevated scenario. And then there are other important matters discussed, because ultimately the housing, like any land use, any of the land use teams, they're going to be tasked with giving some sort of write-up to MUC. And so there were other issues and considerations that the Housing Committee and the Housing Trust wanted to kind of make sure were included as being very important. And so those are also still kind of under discussion as well. And I mentioned, again, this is in draft. Both groups are still kind of individually working these things out. But just to walk you through, so for the moderate scenario, again, for both the moderate and the elevated, it's that residential with community and commercial uses. But for the moderate, aiming for 62 rental units, these would most likely be multifamily buildings with, some fairly significant density, 2 to 3 stories, any 3-story building to have an elevator. The groups are suggesting mixed income with 25 to 50% of the units being affordable. The buildings would meet the town's architectural guidelines. And the groups have kind of comfortably settled at 1.5 parking spots per unit, aiming for a mix of studios, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. For senior-friendly units, looking to have universally accessible units, an elevator, again, particularly for 3-story buildings, and having enough kind of smaller units for smaller households, really aiming to incorporate green energy and net zero. And the groups right now are suggesting that the site go toward the rear of the parcel in place of the former Mattakese classroom area, so the southeast corner of the site. And then in addition to the rental units, the groups are suggesting that there be 100% affordable single-family ownership units as well, that these would be detached units. The model would be, like a habitat neighborhood, and this would be kind of an ideal area that the group was thinking was placing to the west of the rental housing in the graveled area that you see here. So the housing group was really trying to be kind of cognizant of the areas that are already disrupted to avoid. We kind of did a loose GIS calculation, heavy on the loose, but about half the site is disrupted in some way. So the groups are trying to kind of look at where those already disrupted areas, what might make sense. And then that would really leave still a significant amount of the site for other kind of flexible uses. And then again, for the moderate, lastly, the groups were interested in including municipal employee rental units. Because, a lot of the affordable housing programs, the SHI eligible housing, it is, a lot of times what we're thinking of with, municipal employees, workforce housing, it may be above that income tier, that 80%, but people still cannot afford housing, or they cannot find housing in the community. So the suggestion from the groups was that these would be detached rental units, and it'd be used to attract and retain municipal employees. So that's kind of the moderate, the moderate plan for the site. Then for the elevated site, again, it's really all basically the same. It's just increasing the number of units. So this would double the units. And again, this is based on, for your HPP, there is an annual goal. Communities, in order to have an HPP approved by the state, you have to have a stated numerical goal for affordable housing, SHI eligible housing. Again, I'm going with the acronyms here, apologies. Subsidized housing inventory, when I say SHI. That's what I'm referring to. But so that SHI eligible housing, the housing production plan has to have an annual goal that is based on 0.5% of your year-round housing stock. And then if you achieve double that goal, so that 1%, then the community, if you have a approved housing production plan, which you do, you could then request what's called a certified housing production plan. So if you obtain that annual production target for that 0.5% of your year-round housing that I referenced, that gets you a 1-year certified housing production plan. And if you achieve double that, then you get a 2-year certification for your plan. And that gives you more, in a nutshell, it gives you a lot more control over the 40B process during that time period that the housing production plan is certified. So that's, again, where we got those numbers. But really, by and large, everything is kind of staying the same. It's just that there's more housing. So 124 rental units versus the 62 in the moderate, 12 affordable homes. Again, those would be ownership, habitat model. And then again, that would be kind of in the graveled area. I apologize. I'm realizing that I cut the map off too much, and the not all the legend is there, so you can't see that the north arrow. This is turned. So this is the southeast corner here that the committee was referring to with the where they would want to concentrate the housing. And then the ownership units, again, suggesting kind of this area where there's this gravel pit. Just loosely, again, really just trying to focus on the areas of the site that have already been disturbed to protect a lot of the forested areas, and then also to leave ample room on the site for potentially for some of those other uses that other groups are looking at as well. And then this would also plan to kind of double, as it's done with the other types of housing, double the number of municipal employee rental units. Again, suggesting that these be detached units, and really the purpose would be to attract and retain municipal employees. But so these are the moderate and elevated kind of the plan that the housing team has come up with so far, with the input from both the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Housing Committee. So I'm just going to zip back really quickly to that meeting schedule to clarify something in case I was unclear. These housing meetings were a joint meeting of both groups, of the Affordable Housing Trust and of the Community Housing Committee. And they had such great, productive, wonderful conversations for all 3 of the meetings. And it was really, really great to see the ideas that went back and forth, and a lot of the kind of similarities and just common ground. Again, I believe at the subsequent meetings of each group, they were just kind of still fine-tuning some of the language. And then when they are good to go, we at Barrett will then be taking it and producing just a brief write-up that includes, kind of fleshes out some of the other considerations that they want to recommend to the Mattakese Utilization Committee, the MUC group, for their consideration as they review the work of all of those other land use teams. So that's just our update on the work done. And then I just wanted to turn it back to you for a discussion. So I will stop screen sharing there. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the work that, we've done to date. But in terms of the other land use teams, I might not be the most up to date on that. I do know, again, the town's done a really great job of keeping that website updated. So I know at least the work from each group from, I think, the first brainstorming session is up there.
Well, thank you, Alexis. That's very informative. Are there any questions? Mary?
I just want to follow up that if people want to know more about the Mattakese Utilization Project, just go to any search bar and do Yarmouth, put in Yarmouth Mattakese Utilization Project. You'll come to this fantastic webpage that Bill Scott has administered, and it has everything from day one on the MUC process, so that's good. Also, we were able to pull in Barrett Planning, which really helped the housing pod kind of move right along, because for at least the housing piece, we were able to use the county ARPA's funded program where we have a regional housing office. There was a 2-year pilot program where we got 30 hours of technical support from the county's procured consultant. And fortunately, it was Barrett Planning that was procured, and we got 30 hours paid through the county of ARPA funds. ARPA funds paid for it, and that's how we got so far along. It was such a great connection with Barrett Planning that other muck pods have been using them as well. So I think we're in pretty good hands.
Nice.
Thank you, that's good to know. Sharon, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I could probably add a lot. But I think, first of all, I'd like to thank Bob and Bill for creating the process. Actually, Bill is sort of the father of the process. And his baby is working out really well because everyone is talking to one another. And I think that's a great thing that's happened within the town. I don't know that all the housing committees have always talked with one another. So I thank them both for the process they created. It also has saved money, which I think is important to the select board, because we haven't used a consultant, the muck, as of yet, although we've just hired and will be using a consultant to help us with our fine-tuning of our process, which goes into lots of conversations in regards to everybody's submittal of their ideas, which isn't quite finished yet. We're still going to do the economic group at the end of the month, and then we have a bit of time to get everything fine-tuned, and those will go up eventually on a great site that Mary's mentioned that Bill has created. And we have lots of information, lots of data, if you're interested. The condition of the buildings from past school committee reports on Mattakese and Emmy Small, and a number of other great things. Kathy Williams did a zoning analysis that's up there. So there's a great many terrific things that you can find. I also want to, as a liaison to the housing committees, I want to thank, and I think Barbara would too, and Roby, how much fun it's been. Because they are great committees and great representatives from the Yarmouth Housing as well. And we just, I think I speak for Barbara, that we really enjoyed it. And the brainstorming, just so everybody gets an idea and flavor of what the housing has done, is they're brainstorming ideas, and I think there were 26. So they have culled down and had lots of conversations, and still probably having fine-tuning conversations where the groups can kind of come together and agree on different language. But it's been it's been extremely fun for someone like myself who's not traditionally connected to the town, but having a chance to listen to you at all. I have been in real estate, so I kind of know a little bit about some of the things that you all are dealing with. So that's been fun. But as I say, we haven't finished yet this process. And then once that goes, I think we're going to try to be as thorough as possible. And we're going to be data-driven. And we want to kind of analyze everything. I do want to mention that in terms of all the different groups I go to, I do hear different placements for where the schools should go. I do hear different locations where the housing should go. I do hear different conversations about types of fields, types of buildings. So someone's going to be disappointed. And I just want to stick that in the conversation now, so maybe we won't get lambasted by the time we're through. But it actually goes to this board, the select board. So if we change some things, they have the right to do the same too, but we hope we give them good reasons as to why we're suggesting what we do. So it's been interesting and fun, and had a lot of support from Bill Scott through the process, so look forward to keep working on it and hopefully get finished with an A.
Sharon, thank you. I can see it has been fun, but I'm sure it's also been a lot of work and a lot of consensus building, and I appreciate the input that has been done by each and every one so far up to date. Any other questions on MUC, as we call it, or Matakey's Utilization Committee? Bob, would you like to move on?
Okay, certainly. Once again, I thank the members of the Housing Authority and also Wendy for being with us this evening. It was sort of in planning a session that updates on affordable housing. Had we not had this participation, it would be, a big loss for us. So we're very thankful to continue our efforts to bring all of our stakeholders to the table by including the Housing Authority and the work that you're going through. We know that it is an autonomous agency that is organized under the state statutes and not a town board. So I think that makes the participation all the better, and the way you fuel our efforts. And we wanted to turn it over to you for an update. We're very mindful of the release of the RFP on the property that you have, and how you see that process moving forward, and how the concerns of the town can be implemented into that process. And so starting the dialogue, we felt would be very, very important, critical, and valuable. So welcome, and Wendy, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you for inviting us. We are, like you said, a quasi-state federal agency. And the RFP has gone out, and we're awaiting responses by May 7th. 3 p.m. would be, hopefully, we'll have some good responses at that time.
You want to go over the slide? Want me to do it? I'll do it. Give me the mic. So anyway, because I love to speak. So anyways, I did interview Wendy last week. And so the Housing Authority is like my go-to agency when I can't solve a housing problem. I do more and more housing counseling, more than I ever thought possible. But I am really talking to a lot of residents who are in crisis. And it's sad. I'm getting choked up. But anyways, when I have a bad day, I turn to these guys because they've really helped me solve some pretty serious problems. So I just wanted to I interviewed her about what the Housing Authority does. So they have two major components that serve Yarmouth. They have a rental voucher program, and then they own and manage rental properties. So they have 332 federal rental vouchers and 37 state rental vouchers. And what a rental voucher does, it helps a low-income household afford housing by paying a portion of the rent. So remember we were talking about cost burdens before? Mm-hmm. The rental voucher fills that gap so that the household is only paying 30% of their actual income on rent. And so just think about that. If you're a household that went on Social Security, you retired, you're only getting Social Security, that's it. Some people, their Social Security check is only $1,000, right? So if they only have to pay a third of that on their housing costs, they can still live a high-quality life here in Yarmouth. They might take advantage of services from Elder Services or, the senior center or whatever, but we can patch it together and they can have a high-quality life. So those rental vouchers are super important, and they're not easy. They're not easy. Every year they have to verify somebody's income. They get audited. They have to do all sorts of reports. So it's like this quiet program that we don't hear an awful lot about, but it's really important. The other thing is it's very confidential, right? So it's not like we can say, hey, you know, this is the picture of the family that we helped last week. Like, you can't do that. So it's kind of like we hear all this stuff, but we can't really say the story. I can't bring those stories to you. So it's kind of a weird situation that we're in. But anyways, we're like silent sufferers sometimes, I think. The other thing is rental properties. So right now, the Yarmouth Housing Authority owns and manages 40 rental units at Long Pond Plaza. So these serve seniors that are 60 plus and disabled individuals. So people know where this is. It's at 534 Winslow Gray. So it's the very end of Winslow Gray, over to the right. If you hit the stop sign, if you're at the stop sign, you've already passed the driveway. So people just, and it's right there. But I have been in some of the units. We've helped those units. We've done some de-letting there. I think we helped with the heating. New stoves.
Painted all the railings.
We painted the railings. I think back in the day, we fixed some sidewalk issues, and the state gives money to the housing authority as well to maintain those properties. They also lease out a congregate living facility to a local nonprofit to house disabled adults. So there is another facility. And as we mentioned before, there is right now out a request for proposal to select a developer to design, construct, operate and manage affordable rental units at 506 Forest Road. And this RFP is due May 7th, 2025. Now, I was instructed to give you the whole RFP. Sorry, it's like this huge document. It was like ships passing in the night. I wish I had said, do you want the whole thing? But it all is in there, and I did copy the full thing for everybody that wanted it because it has a lot of information in the appendices. And so you keep seeing the lot over and over and over again, but there's actually a lot of information connected to it. And maybe you could go through about who helped you write the RFP.
So we worked with Laura Schufelt from the Mass Housing Partnership, and who's the professional in all of this, and with her guidance, the board, it took over a year to come to fruition to put out the RFP with careful consideration for the neighbors, buffer zones. There's certain criteria that is more advantageous in the RFP when the proposals come back that the board will review and try to find the most advantageous criteria before going forward. We will not own the property. It will be the developer who owns it, will lease the land. They'll build it, they'll manage it, but it will be hopefully 100% affordable with different income guidelines between 30% AMI and 80% AMI, all inclusive in the units.
Wendy, is AMI, for the people listening at home, average median income?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Once again, just getting into those alphabet.
And Drew, I see that you have it open to that page.
Yeah.
The criteria.
Would you go over that a little bit? What, is that an attachment or?
Well, you mean, it's just the part of the RFP that gives the criteria
What
that we're
page is
looking
it, Drew?
for.
It's attachment A.
It's attachment A. I just thumbed through till I got to it, so there aren't page numbers here. But it is attachment A.
It's not that far in.
It's not that far in.
No, Bob Lawton won't accept a document without page.
Yeah, no page numbers on this.
It's on the 12th page.
Attachment A, comparative evaluation criteria, 506 Forest
I have
Road.
like 3 copies of it.
And it shows
So I tried, yeah.
what we're looking for in it. And this was developed with the expertise of the Mass Housing Partnership. We're not experts on this, but they are. And we think we believe that they've come up with a moderate and possibly doable proposal. We'll see if we get proposals back from developers. The affordability is the second section there, and it says that advantageous is 100% affordable to 80% AMI with some targeted at or below 50% AMI. And highly advantageous, we would have units ranging from 30% to 80% AMI, because the mission of a housing authority in Massachusetts is to try to provide safe, decent housing for people of lower income. And we have to see what is economically feasible for a developer to do. We also, part of the mission is to create such housing, if possible, for residents. And since the Housing Authority owns this particular property, it's an opportunity to create affordable housing, and we know there's a tremendous need for affordable housing. So that's what's kicked off the whole thing, right, Bambi? Do you think I've got it straight on that? Okay. And so we're waiting for proposals to come back to see if any come back that meet our criteria. And that will be, we'll start finding out on May 7th on that. And then it would be up to the developer. This would be a 40B development, and it would be up to the developer to present their proposal to the town and to see if they can satisfy all the health and safety, water, wastewater, stormwater requirements that are necessary.
Yep.
What else?
I think you did a good job.
What do you think, Mary?
Yeah, I think it's good. So they have, can I have the mic again? They have minimum requirements, which minimum requirements are in the front part, and then if a developer or a project team brings those in, then they looked at these selection criteria. So they have stuff on developer experience, the affordability. You'll see that that kind of is different than Matakees, what we recommended for Matakees. The site design, there's criteria there. They talk about financial feasibility because they do not want to partner with an entity that won't be able to finish the job. And then it says references, site visits, and interviews. So that just gives you a flavor, you know. We've been through this different times in the Affordable Housing Trust. So, for example, we did RFPs for the motel redevelopments. But it's really not a very technically hard document to read through, the RFP. So I'd give it a little time. And I'm sure that if you had any, maybe you have some comments tonight or some questions right now, but if you have anything that comes up later on, I'm sure Wendy and Bambi Wyatt Rosario is the chair of the board. I'm sure they can answer your questions.
I thought of one other thing. Laura and the Mass Housing Partnership tried to craft this, and I think they did, so that it would not be too big, that it would be moderate enough to be able to meet all the environmental requirements. And I'm hopeful that it would be able to meet those requirements. And one of the things that have been included in here is that we're hoping that it would be a green type project, a net zero type aspiration, and that would be highly advantageous in our qualification. So that's part of it too.
Is this RFP available for the public if they want to access it? And if so, where do they need to go to get it?
They can email or call my office, and I can email it out. It might be on the, I don't know if
It's in our packet.
But I don't know that that's on.
It's a-
I don't think it was in our packet.
No, it wasn't.
Unfortunately.
The link to it was,
It was.
Look at
Link.
it. This is
Okay,
our
maybe the
packet.
link.
It is?
It's in there.
Okay.
Sure is.
So if they go to the select board and look at the meeting date of April 22nd,
there's a link to it.
there's a link to be able to get to the RFP.
Yes.
Okay, great.
All didn't get a copy.
We did. We all have a copy.
Yeah.
So some people got it only electronically, and it's towards the end. But it looks like that. It
That's
does
the front
exist.
page.
It does exist. And so how do they get in touch with the Housing Authority? What's the phone number?
508-398-29, I'm going to draw a blank.
2920.
2920.
It's 508-398-2920. You can ask for a copy of the RFP that way, or you can contact me. I'm at Town Hall, 508-398-2231, extension 1275, or mwagon@yarmouth.ma.us.
Call now before it's too late.
But wait, there's more.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Tracy?
I'm happy to hear Mr. Kraus talk about the process, right? So there's a lot of concerns with the water, and we know that you're down this road, and I'm not trying to backtrack or whatever. So you said it's a 40B project, but they need to meet the criteria of the town bylaws. Isn't that kind of contradictory to itself? I mean, won't a 40B exempt them from certain parts of our
Maybe you
bylaw?
probably know more about it than I do. It exempts from certain zoning requirements,
Okay,
but I don't think it would exempt them from health standards and water standards in any way.
okay.
That I don't think it, I hope it doesn't. I wouldn't want it to.
Okay,
I don't think it does, yeah.
all right. So it's going to go through a regular process with the town after somebody's selected, and, so we'll have to go to the Board of Appeals?
Right.
It does.
So hopefully it's a friendly 40B, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Can you just talk about the difference?
Right.
Sure. So this developer is probably going to apply to the state for state financing, right? Low-income housing tax credits, et cetera. As such, it won't go through the normal friendly 40B process that we use, which is through the local initiative program office, where, we're constantly looking at these plans, different departments are looking at the plans, kicking it up to the state, meeting with the developer and kind of working those things out. But once a developer is selected, right, it doesn't stop that developer from coming into town hall and working with us and having those informal site plan reviews and working with the people that are involved in friendly 40Bs. So I'm hoping that the developer that gets selected does not like aggressive Chapter 40Bs, right? Want something that will fit in with the town. The fact that in this RFP, if you go to the very end, there's some sketches about how things are laid out. I don't know if I can, Bambi. So I don't want to misspeak, but it's
They're labeled conceptual only, right?
attachment E. And it has some sketches. So you can see from the sketches, they're not cutting down every tree, right? They don't want it clear cut. The other thing is, the site is 18 acres, and I was very encouraged that the preliminary engineering on the site put a cap of 90 bedrooms.
49 units.
And 49 units. So now just wrap your head around this a little bit, right? It's 18 acres, right? There's some zoning in town that allows much higher density than that. And I was thrilled that this 18-acre parcel was not going to be used for a mega development. I really appreciate that. And it kind of shows to me that that we could work stuff out, So the first step is to identify a developer who wants to work with the housing authority to develop this property. Hopefully, it. Part of that process is involving the town, because we have a ton of resources. We have experience. We know how to get things done in affordable housing that fits what the town wants. So I'm hoping that, that door is open. That door is open. You guys get to you all get to select the developer, but I hope the first thing you do is refer them to us to help make that project the best that it can be. I remember one of the very first comments I had on this was to keep the buffer trees.
And that's in here.
And it's in there. So, anyways.
It occurred to me that the thing about 90 bedrooms is, I'm pretty sure that is a maximum, because that will ensure that we can, that the developer would be complying with what the health department can allow in a Zone 2 wellhead protection zone
Right.
for the number of bedrooms for that amount of acreage. See what I mean? Like it's scaled so that it could very well be approvable under the current regulations. I think that's how they came up with that, yeah.
Now, after they get control of the property, and it could be through some type of written agreement, legally binding agreement, that's when they start the process with the state to apply for the project eligibility letter. They can't go to the Zoning Board of Appeals without the project eligibility letter, right? During that review, the town will be notified that there's a site visit and a 30-day comment period for the project site eligibility letter. And we have to have our sneakers on when that happens, because we have to act quick. And so we had that. Remember the old laundry site on Route 28? We did that. We all got there. Went to the site visit. It was freezing cold. I think whatever. It was rainy that day. But we went and we put in comments that drastically changed that project. So that's something that we all have to take advantage of when that comes around. That's one of the things that towns do not take advantage of, is that 30-day comment period. If the state goes forward and issues a site eligibility letter, then that project proponent, I think, has 2 years to apply to the ZBA. And it's a pretty comprehensive packet, because it's for a comprehensive permit, right? It is, the Cape Cod Commission does get to review the project, but the project doesn't fall under the Cape Cod Commission review as a development of regional impact, right? Which is normally triggered at 30
Unless
units.
it's requested.
Right, right. But we do send the packet. So I sit in the same office as the ZBA administrative assistant. So I usually help with these, because it's involved in affordable housing. We get these packets from the developer, and they all go out to different entities, one being the Cape Cod Commission, the Planning Board, the Board of Health, the Select Board, and we have 30 days to collect all the comments and bring them to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who processes this as a special permit granting authority. And we can hire a technical consultant from the state to help us with that review. I believe, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, that special permit granting authorities in town can hire consultants to review any technical document that comes in, right, at the cost of the applicant.
That is correct.
So if we take advantage of all the things that we know about, the public comment periods, getting the engineers to peer review work, getting technical assistance money, and hiring a Chapter 40B consultant to help our ZBA through the process, we should do fairly well. We should do fairly well.
Bob?
Well, I just wanted to point out, there's a couple of things that would be best. It would be a little easier, I think, on the overall process if the Housing Authority took some affirmative steps on some of the particular issues. And there was a public meeting that was held previously that, there was a lot of discussion around some of the preliminary engineering. And I would say that one of the things we'd like to specifically request in your selection process to hone in on the issue first is the water supply protection, there are those nearby water supply wells that are quite frankly threatened with excess nitrogen, nitrate levels. There's issues involving emerging contaminants and PFAS that are rife throughout that area as a result of overdevelopment. And I don't think that there's any way that additional development could occur without a nitrogen removal, advanced nitrogen removal system there. And it's not required in the RFP, but it can be required in the selection process. And I just think that the specter of a threat to the town's public water supply, creates a major barrier to this particular development, and I can't stress enough that that is an issue that, and I know I don't speak for this board, but we establish the various goals of the town as goal number one. We don't do anything, before the water supply is protected, and so we ask for your sensitivity there. And the other issue that is mentioned, I think, in detail, but needs some, I think, additional work is the stormwater management plan. Is that I know that we've heard a number of times from area residents that it's a high groundwater zone to begin with, and there are stormwater management problems in all of the developed areas within the vicinity of the proposed development. And the stormwater management plan is going to be absolutely critical. I think that there's a lot of belief that this development could impact neighboring properties, and there is an ability to head that off and to really present detailed information. That is there a way that, number one, all of the from the runoff from the site is contained, but what other areas of the site can be managed to help if there's any runoff already going to any neighboring properties. It's a real concern, and as far as technical issues, those are a couple that I wanted to mention that hopefully if this thing rolls into the ZBA and we have all consultants and this is the first time these issues come up, it's going to be extraordinarily problematic. So we were hoping that those issues really need to be addressed before the selection is done, and also the ability of the Housing Authority to maintain site control in the instance that a successful permitting process is not mounted, is if the developer doesn't have the wherewithal to answer questions and address these issues. We'd like to know that the Housing Authority maintains the site control sufficient to ensure that those get done. And so those are just a couple of concerns just right off the bat. And
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for being at this meeting. I think one of the reasons why we organize this meeting is because we think when we're dealing with the topic of housing that it would be beneficial to have everyone sitting down and talking to one another about what we're working on, what our hopes are, what our dreams are, and where we can be helpful to one another. And I think we're all very mindful of the challenge that each of us have, each of the committees, each of these groups. And my hope is that after today's meeting, we can continue to have a dialogue and continue to work together. I think this kind of discussion, this kind of interaction is pretty productive, and it will be as it continues. So I don't want, particularly for the Housing Authority representatives that are here, I just want to be pretty straightforward that this project itself, I think, unfortunately, has the potential to be incredibly divisive in this community. We have a town meeting vote, at least one that was strongly against the project. And I attended the public meeting in which this was discussed, and it was a packed room of residents against it. From my point of view, I've been involved in local government throughout my career, and typically town meetings are the governing bodies that we look to for guidance in terms of how we as select board members need to engage with projects and with other groups. And so when a project like this sort of generates significant opposition in the community and a very strong vote against it at town meeting, it makes it very, very difficult for an executive board like a select board to be engaged in a productive or positive way on a project. And I'm glad that our town administrator identified some of the issues that are really serious and I think are at the core of the opposition to the project. So I think it's incredibly important to address those issues. But I'm just curious how you've got a full room of neighbors and residents coming in opposed to the project. You have a very strong vote, at least one at town meeting against the project. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to the people that are dead set against this? Do you have some comments or thoughts about how you're maybe hoping to proceed, maybe to engage support for the project? How do you want to deal with that? Because quite frankly, some of these details that we're getting tonight are helpful. It's helpful for us to know this information. My hope is that people will be watching. But how do you respond to the folks, the widespread opposition to this project? What's the message to them and to your neighbors?
You want to give a message? Nope. Well, there is no project yet. I mean, we're going to see what proposals come back. And it is up to us on the board of the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority to potentially approve one of those proposals. Then I don't know what all the resources we can bring to bear to work with the developer, they'll know better than we do, to publicize and advocate for the plan that we have agreed would be workable and would help the town of Yarmouth by providing a significant amount of affordable housing. And you say the information we presented today was helpful, but this is information about a potential proposal. There is no proposal yet. And the reason that I'm personally, this is just me personally, I'm not speaking for anyone else, I'm interested in seeing it go forward and see what proposals we get, is that I personally believe that it can be environmentally safe at the level that it's being proposed. The two things that you brought up are absolutely right on point and in that order. Like the first priority is drinking water, obviously, and the second priority is stormwater runoff, because they have all those flooding problems in the neighboring neighborhood. And I'm not an expert. I don't have all the facts at the tip of my tongue, but I'm persuaded that at this moment that there may be viable answers to that, and maybe we can work with the developer to put that across to people and to say what the benefit of it would be, which is decent, safe, hopefully somewhat attractive, affordable housing that doesn't use up all 18 and a half acres, but uses up maybe, I don't know, half of it for housing with plenty of trees left. So that's all I got for
Well
tonight.
Joyce?
Oh. I had a question. I guess it would be for Drew or Bambi, part one, and then for somebody from town staff for part two. I was wondering about the proposed timeline. I know you don't have a proposal yet, but like what would be your ideal and how that runs parallel to the sewering of that whole area.
Yeah. What do we know about the sewering? That's not
that's not- I
going
don't-
up there, scheduled to go up that road for quite a long time, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah,
So the development would presumably precede
to
the
have- yeah.
sewers?
Yes.
I'm assuming that the affordable housing developer is going to ask that question,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And call the engineering department and our water department and do diligence, in any proposal.
So things might, in terms of sewering that area, get done a little faster, perhaps?
That would be a lovely thing. I don't know at
Or
this
they could
moment.
build a
That's a
treatment
really
plant.
good comment,
Or-
and
They
I'm
have
writing it
to.
down.
Very good comment. yes.
Or there could be a treatment plant
They have to
associated
have
with.
on-site treatment.
Yeah, we're going to have
I
some
don't-
kind of on-site treatment of water, yes. You were pointing.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Norm, I believe you have a question?
Forward and blocking your hand. Go ahead.
Just a comment. Thank you, Bob, for very delicately expressing some of the concerns of the neighborhood and of the town. This proposal was originally approved for 30 units, not the 90 bedrooms. And it was senior housing. That's what's in town meeting. Look at the details. They're available. Any additional water introduced into that area will increase flooding in Captain's Village. Any increase in water. Be aware of that. It'll open up the town and them to a lawsuit.
Elizabeth, did you have something? Sorry, Liz, I should
Oh, no,
say,
that's
not
okay.
Elizabeth.
I felt like I did something wrong. Oh, I'm sorry.
They get the full name with Argo if you do something wrong.
I commend you, having most of my career building RFPs and going through procurement, but I'm concerned that you're agreeing with the criteria that are really beyond the norm, that need to be explicit. And I think you're shooting yourself in the foot by not spelling it out in your RFP. The advanced nitrogen treatment is not specified. It should be specified that it is a part of the criteria. The stormwater management and a map to describe what you're talking about, I think should be in your RFP. I don't think you can expect a developer to read your mind, and unfortunately, that's what you're going to have a lot of people reading this, and it looks very easy to accomplish, but it really isn't, and I don't think you've been clear about what you need, and I also question the fact that you don't require any bonding of any kind, which I've just never been involved with an RFP that didn't require bonding if it's a big project like this of some kind. I also wonder, who's your evaluation committee going to be?
Well, there's only 3 board members to begin with, so.
I think that might need to be expanded and again, this is your RFP, but we did at Cape and Vineyard Electric Cooperative, we always reached out to the host community and incorporated select board members and so on, so.
Yes.
Those are my comments. I know it's out and so on, but it's almost like, perhaps an amendment or addendum could go up and out so that you still have time to alert your developers that there are some real specific requirements. And that might save you a lot of time with weeding through some people who really are not equipped to do this.
That's a good point. Are there any other?
I think you've
Yes, I have a comment.
Sure.
Hi, this is Greg Wheeler. I'm on the Community Housing Committee. I want to say that first and foremost, I'm in favor of affordable housing, just not in this location. We have a very limited amount of undeveloped land on the Cape, and it's shrinking. And I'd like to see this property stay just as it is. I understand that we can't force people to put affordable housing in blighted areas on Route 28, but to me, it makes more sense. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. And I also think that by doing that, we kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I think that future generations would appreciate the fact that we left the limited undeveloped land in this town just as it is, undeveloped. Again, I'm all for affordable housing. I think we need it, not just affordable housing for renters, but also for people who want to buy a home. This is a great community to live in, but we're running out of undeveloped land, and it'd be a shame to see that go to waste. Thank you.
Can I just say, I agree with Greg. It's, again, I've been here since maybe too long, but, you know, there was a point in time many years ago where, before we went down this road, it's problematic now. They have an RFP out. They are the owners of the property. The town meeting votes that Mark talked about are real. I mean, this has been an issue for many, many years. And before the Cavalier was even developed, there was a point in time where we tried to discuss switching properties, so, or doing some type of transfer of development rights where we would not develop on this land, but give them that right somewhere else. You know, I'm personally still in favor of all of that, but I think, you know, I'm happy they're here now, but, you know, they have an RFP out for this, and we, at this point in time, hopefully they will incorporate the issues that Bob talked about and Liz talked about into their proposal, and, but it doesn't seem to me that they have any interest in switching their plan at this point. But again, many, many years ago, there was, after the town meeting vote, there was dialogue about not developing this and trying to find a different parcel of land for them to develop. But I think, you know, with the technicalities that go along with that and, you know, the property that they own, it became very difficult. And they've had the property for, you know, since the 80s. So it's, you know, they've had it for a lot of years. And then there was a push to say, oh, at least if you're going to own it, do something with it. So I just hope we have better communication going forward. We work together. I think, you know, like what Greg was just saying, I think you've heard our discussions about affordable housing. Everybody here knows we need affordable housing, and we just want to put it in places where it's not impactful. And I think that's our responsibility, is to make sure that, you know, we protect our water. That's key. And, you know, again, this has been going on for a long time, and, you know, we'll see what happens. Perhaps the RFP, they won't be able to generate something from it, and then we can come back to the table and have some real discussions. But I think that helping you develop affordable housing is something that we should, it's a priority, right? We need it. So maybe we can work together to find a better place for it if this doesn't work out.
But if that doesn't happen, whatever we can do to ensure the water supply is protected and the stormwater drainage is protected is just crucial. So I would ask you, it's a tough decision for you to make as a board, and as Bambi was saying, there are three of you. You might think of having someone join you from a subcommittee who has that expertise to assist you in making that decision. Ideally, we'd all like to see it go somewhere else. I mean, I don't think anyone here is going to tell you any different. But if we can't, then we want to do what we can to protect the people that live around that area. And I will really appreciate your coming here tonight. And I really want you to know that what you're hearing here is that we would like to help you in any way we can. What we don't want to do is to set up an adversarial arrangement that isn't going to be to the benefit of the people that live in this town. We really all are here for the same thing, and that is to provide safe, affordable housing for people that live in this town and a safe environment for people that live in this town. So I appreciate your coming tonight. Are there any other questions? Actually, yes, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we've come to the
I think we've
end of
come to
our
the
agenda.
conclusion. Yes.
Pause.
Ceremony?
Yeah, adjournment ceremony. I just once again want to thank you all for coming. I think that what I would like to see personally is that this not be the one time we do it all year. But now that we've seen each other, it's time to come back and have another update on how things are going. And I appreciate your time and energy tonight and all of the hard work that all of you are doing. It's fantastic. Any questions or comments by any of the other members?
Excited.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a second on that. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you and
I
good
have a
night.
comment.